Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. This is a permanent slogan over the last 2 years. So welcome to all participants from around the world and the United States. My name is Joanna Regulska, and I'm Vice Provost and Dean of Global Affairs. And I'm also a professor of gender, sexuality, and women's studies here at the University of California, Davis. It is my pleasure to moderate the discussion today, and we have a fantastic group of speakers. The keynote will be given by Professor Ermias Kebreab, and then we have our colleagues from the consortium that is working on SDG 2, the Zero Hunger. José, Villalobos, Patrick, Cortbaoui, George Leitz, Leonardo, Guilletti, and I will be moderating. Before we start, I would like to turn over to Drew Cartwright, who is our Chief Operating Officer of the University Global Coalition, and without whom this fabulous conference this week and many other things would not have happened. So Drew, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Joanna, and thank you everyone for being here today, and to the wonderful panelists. I'm looking forward to this conversation. Let me see if I can advance my slide here. Just a couple of notes before we get started. The session is being recorded. Recordings will be available on the UGC website within a week or so. After the conference, we'll send out an email to all of the panelists and registered attendees. If you would like to ask questions during the panel, please use the Q&A feature. That helps us keep it separate. The chat gets kind of long sometimes. But if you would like to share information with hosts and panelists or everyone on the call, you can select who to chat with in the chat feature. And here is our conference schedule. As you can see, we're on day 4 of the conference on our final session for today, and excited to get started here. We do have 2 more sessions tomorrow, from traditional to transformative engagement at 9 a.m. Eastern time. And then our closing session, which features heads of different SDG networks talking about how we can better work together to advance the SDGs. So with that, I am going to turn it back to Joanna. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Drew, so much for all your hard work that you've put over months and months to bring us all together. As I've mentioned, our session will focus on the challenges of reaching SDG 2, which is zero hunger, by 2030. And of course, we are always engaging in discussing and thinking about different possible pathways towards achieving this goal. So, of course, universities do play a very critical role in taking humanity towards around sustainable food systems. We are looking forward to engaging with all of you and the partner institutions. And this particular session highlights really the expertise from university that have come together in a new consortium as a part of University Global Coalition. The consortium began in the fall 2020 with a partnership on SDG 2 between UC Davis and Earth University. However, since then, other partners have joined us in this effort, and now the consortium includes McGill University, Newcastle University, and University of Sao Paulo. And we are, of course, always welcoming and thinking about others who are engaged also in the advancing SDG 2. The consortium is exploring those unique role that university can play and should play in advancing SDGs 2, including opportunities to build on individual faculty strengths, collaborative institutional work that is being done, focusing on research, on future leadership development and impact, but also on engaging students. And that, I think, is a very important part of our conversations, because the students will be the future leaders around the world, and we wanted to bring them into the conversations as soon as possible. Another important dimension is, of course, fostering the North-South dialogue and mutual and equitable learning. And this is something that we are very much committed to doing. Each of the partners in an initial stage has actually mapped what they're doing around SDG 2 on our own campuses, and that kind of allow us to identify our areas of strengths, but also our areas of complementarity. We are preparing an International Student Challenge on Zero Hunger this fall, which will be actually open to both undergraduate, graduate students, to enable them really to work in teams with other universities. And I think that's something that is very important, that we are not situating ourselves only in the silos of our own institutions, but actually recognize that the Global Zero Hunger has both solutions and challenges which depend on our collaboration. And we also planning on bringing faculty from the consortium together to begin discussion about agricultural productivity and nutrition, and how we might approach this innovative way to work in these areas. So those are just few first steps. But we are certainly committed to continue to develop and contribute to the solutions around the zero hunger. So without further ado, I would like to introduce my dear colleague, Ermias Kebreab, who is Associate Dean of Global Engagement and Director of the World Food Center in the College of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences here at UC Davis. He holds the Sesnon Endowed Chair in the Department of Animal Sciences. Dr. Kebreab was awarded the 2022 Chancellor's Innovation Award for pioneering research to reduce methane emissions from cattle. So we call him Mr. Cow. That's our local nickname. He has authored more than 250 peer-reviewed publications, and he chairs the United Nations FAO Technical Working Group on methane, and he is a member of National Academy of Sciences, Engineering and Medicine's Board of Agriculture and Natural Resources. So welcome, Ermias, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Joanna. Let me just get straight. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see this. Thank you for allowing me to give this keynote today to talking about achieving zero hunger by 2030, and talking about what are the challenges in order to be for us to build a sustainable and resilient food system. And we're taking the lens of innovation today. So the objectives really is, what are the potential paths that we have in order to achieve this zero hunger, and it's only 8 years away. So what are the paths? And one of the paths is looking into innovation. So this coalition, basically, we're trying to come up with some of the innovations that was developed through the universities and other partners, particularly partners in the country that we work with, and also the funding agencies and in collaboration to come up with those innovations. So I'm going to go through a number of those innovations and give some examples on how those are implemented. Some of you may know about the UN Food Systems Summit that happened last year, and so they had these 5 action tracks for SDG 2 in particular. So the way that I organize this is I'm going to look into those 5 different tracks and what are the innovations within those 5 different tracks that would help us into getting to net zero. So for the first one, for example, is to ensure access to safe and nutritious food for all. And what that means is that we need to work to end hunger and all forms of malnutrition, and reduce the incidence of non-communicable disease, and all people at all times have access to sufficient quantities of affordable but also safe food. The second action track is to shift to sustainable consumption patterns, and that means working to build consumer demand for sustainably produced food, strengthening the local value chains and improving nutrition, and also promoting the reuse and recycling of food. In addition, we try to eliminate food waste, facilitate a transition in diets that require fewer resources. In action 3, that is boosting nature positive production. So this nature positive idea is really gaining a lot of ground right now. People might talk about regenerative agriculture, or it could be sustainable intensification, but things that would help nature in general. So I would call it nature-based solutions is what we will look into this track. And this is basically to optimize environmental resource use in food production, and also in processing and distribution of food as well. Try to reduce biodiversity loss, which we are now way outside of our planetary boundary on this, and also pollution, water use, soil degradation, as well as greenhouse gas emissions, and try to deepen our understanding of the constraints and opportunities that are facing smallholder farmers, and support governance with incentives to reduce food loss and other environmental impacts. The fourth action track is on advancing equitable livelihoods. And this includes contribution to the elimination of poverty by promoting full and productive employment, reduce risks for the poor, enabling entrepreneurship and inequitable resource access, and improve resilience through social protection and ensure food systems as well. So the last action track is the build resilience to vulnerabilities, shocks, and stress. And this means we need to ensure the functionality of sustainable food systems, conflict or natural disaster-prone areas, and promote global action to protect food supplies from impacts of pandemics like the one that we just had. Ensure that all people within the food system are empowered to prepare for and withstand and recover from instability. And also building food systems that, despite the shocks and stress that we see, deliver food security, nutrition, and equitable livelihoods for everyone. So moving on to trying to, okay, there you go. So when we look at the first track, what are the innovations that are in this track? So one example that I would like to share with you is this small sachet of fortified food-based supplement that have been given to young kids in low and middle income countries in particular. So more than half of child deaths worldwide come from preventable causes, such as adverse effects from malnutrition. Recent studies have shown that child mortality significantly drops when children receive nutritional supplements rich in vitamins, minerals, and essential fatty acids as well. The same study found that supplements may decrease mortality among children that are in less than 24 months by as much as 27%. That's quite a big reduction, particularly in low and middle income countries. Nutrient supplements, typically they consist of a mixture of legumes. It could be peanuts, it could be lentils or chickpea paste, and add a little bit of milk powder, oil, and a full complement of vitamins and minerals that children need. So this tiny package that you see here is fortified peanut butter that only has about 100 calories. and it's actually enough to spread on a single piece of bread, or it can be mixed with other foods. And the packets are designed to be added to the child's diet daily as they transition from breastfeeding to complementary foods or just normal family food. And the results of this study have shown that these supplements could have effects beyond just preventing stunting, wasting, and malnutrition as well. The other innovation, sort of in a similar vein, is using multiple fortified table salt and bouillon cubes that will help in this food system transformation. As we know, table salt and other salt-containing condiments, such as bouillon cubes, have cultural importance as they are used to enhance the flavor of foods that are cooked at home. And given the widespread and universal consumption across income classes, and that are both in urban and rural populations, these condiments are an integral part of the food system, and so we can use those as part of this transformation. And fortifying of those with salt and salt-containing condiments, they can play a role in delivery of population-wide nutritional and health benefits. And there has been some trials that was conducted in Cameroon, in Ghana, in Haiti, and they have shown quite a considerable success in this area. So the other, in going to the track 2, some of the innovations in track 2 for sustainable consumption patterns is the development of small-scale innovations like cold rooms that help improve the nutritional and marketable values of fruit and vegetables. Because nutritious fruits and vegetables are more perishable and more expensive than most staple foods. So they need particular attention to improve the affordability and access as well. So improved all year round sustainable production would increase efficiency of inputs and reduce in food loss, and that would help to increase access and availability of nutritious food and vegetables. Post-harvest is an improvement in post-harvest management, and practices are really critical link between farmers' fields and markets. Innovations for net house production of safe vegetables, small-scale cold rooms facilitate markets and reduce food loss, as well as other post-harvest handling innovations have been developed in many countries. High temperatures quickly reduce the nutritional and marketable value of fruits and vegetables, mainly through water loss, decay, or over ripening. Then that will then result into significant product losses and associated income for small-scale producers of fruit and vegetables. So there have been different methods that have been researched to try to save those and to increase their shelf life. The Horticulture Innovation Lab that is funded by USAID, among others, they designed this thing that you see here on the picture. It's a small-scale cold room that incorporates a technology called CoolBot that will provide an affordable way for small-scale farmers to cool crops and farms. So this is way out in the rural areas. It can be powered by a solar panel, and through this technology, you can increase significantly the shelf life of fruits and vegetables. And in a similar vein, there are things like dry cards and chimney store dryers and net houses that have been developed to prevent food as well. So dry cards, for example, when you have high moisture contents and poorly dried product, it can result in the growth of toxic molds. The dry card was introduced as an inexpensive device to measure relative humidity in containers to prevent mold growth. The dry card is at the moment being used in over 11 countries. And you see here on the picture, it's all translated into different languages as well. So people can get this dry card in different languages, and all they do is they just put it into those jars where they are saving the seeds and vegetables, and they can see how wet or dry it is, and so the conditions in which they need to do either more further drying or they should be okay. So this has been really one of the success stories of innovations that saves food and helps in food security. The other one you see in the middle is the Chimney solar dryer. So this unique design combines solar heat collection with rapid airflow for efficient drying of fresh produce. So this allows farmers to efficiently dry fruits, vegetables, and other foods for a long-term storage. And the last picture you see is net houses in Cambodia, because small-scale Cambodian vegetables or vegetable growers, what they do is there's a densely cultivated along the riversides, and they use quite heavy pesticides. There's a heavy use of pesticides in those areas. So net house production of vegetables in Cambodia were introduced to improve production of safe and vegetables with quite a big success. So you see those nets now a lot of places, and the design is improving all the time. But that really helps in reducing the amount of pesticide that they need to use, and that's food safety issue and human safety issue as well as getting a better product at the end of the day as well. So moving on to the action track 3, this is sort of the nature positive kind of production. I'm going to give one example from animal production and another example from sort of plant and soil kind of thing. So the first example here is innovation in animal production. Improved feed formulation or ration balancing for livestock holds really great promise to improve livestock productivity in low and middle income countries, and making highly nutritious animal source food more affordable and environmentally sustainable as well. You need to have an accurate knowledge of the nutrient requirement of livestock in order to be able to improve productivity. So what's been happening in high-income countries is you have those ration formulation methods and software that everybody uses. No farmer would ever dream of not using that to balance their rations. So this is now is being introduced in other countries as well. There are a number of efforts that's happening at the moment, and the unique thing here is that all this will be in the local language. The example here you see is in Amharic, and eventually what would happen is that we have just one software, then people will come in and they will basically click the country they are in and the language they want to use and the type of animal they want to formulate for, and then they will be able to run that. And in addition, nowadays there is access to mobile phones in some areas where we work with, like in Vietnam, for example. Farmers do have access to mobile phones. So this is now integrated into this mobile apps. So all they need to do is have that mobile app, and they can run it, and they don't need to have internet access or anything like that. So it always be in the app, and then they get updates whenever they're connected to the internet. They'll be getting updates as well. So this is again something that's been happening. It's been done in Ethiopia and in Vietnam, and now it's expanding in surrounding areas, Cambodia, Laos, Nigeria, and the like. The other innovations in healthy soils, and soil is extremely important for agriculture, as we all know. So the 4 R's are being promoted, and these are the right product at the right rate, at the right time, and in the right place. So this is a best management practice to achieve optimum nutrient efficiency and to increase soil organic carbon. Soil test kits that you see here on the picture, they help understand the relationship between essential nutrients and plant growth and the importance of organic matter in soils. So in high-income countries, basically, you take a sample of soil, you take it to the lab and you do this analysis, and you get this profile, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. But in low-income countries, you can't do that. There's no, there's not enough resources to do that. So this kind of kits will help in doing that. And this has been introduced in Pakistan. And the test basically shows what the soil was, low in nitrogen, maybe high in potassium, maybe moderate in phosphorus. So the fertilizers can then be adjusted to meet the requirements of the plants. Water is very critical to support all kinds of life on Earth. Solar energy can be used to pump water, and these solar-powered pumping systems are really ideal for remote locations. But the economics of solar-powered pumping systems can only be justified if it's properly designed and also linked to high-efficiency irrigation systems. So you can use drip irrigation, bubbler, sprinkler, or furrow irrigation methods. So it goes very well with that. And this has been successfully introduced to Pakistan, and a number of farms are using that at the moment. Going into the action track 4, basically this is developing innovations for social protection and sustainable graduation. So it's not really the sort of tangible product that I've shown you in the previous tracks. This is more about the social protection. So these innovations are designed to enhance household ability to manage risk and reduce poverty, while also building evidence to assist policymakers in design of poverty reduction programs in particularly risk-prone areas. There is evidence of multifaceted graduation programs in several countries. These innovative graduation programs are efforts to move beyond the traditional social protection measures. So traditionally, we've been using cash handouts and other piecemeal efforts at poverty reduction, but these multifaceted approaches are designed as a comprehensive program. So this includes, it involves like training and saving programs and health intervention and other components as well, in order to support poor households to shift from insecure and fragile income sources to more sustainable income generating activities. And the results of a 6-country study that was conducted recently suggest that there's a positive impact overall, with particularly strong and significant positive effect in the area of food consumption. And lastly, in the track 5, agricultural index insurance payouts on an easy to measure index of factors such as rainfall or average yield that predict individual losses have been gaining attention a little bit. Index insurance, in contrast with the traditional indemnity insurance, they make a payout to all insured clients in a certain geographically defined area when an index signals imminent crop or livestock losses, regardless of whether the individual loss has occurred or not. So index insurance is really attractive as a risk management tool in low and middle income countries, where the fixed cost of verifying claims for a high number of small farms make conventional insurance really expensive. So if there is a shock happening, and if you have a traditional insurance, you have to go to every farmer and ascertain that how much they lost and all that. So that takes a lot of time, a lot of resources, and becomes more expensive to the farmers. While with this index type of insurance, basically you use a satellite imagery of vegetation as the index to determine if forage conditions are sufficient to sustain livestock assets. The expectation that climate change will contribute to an increasing incidence of weather-related shocks, along with rigorous and well-documented and ongoing assessments of this innovation, will continue to fuel interest in agricultural index insurance and informing improved design of related products in order to strengthen household resilience and enhance food security at the same time. So, and in conclusion, I've been talking about different innovations, and I picked out innovations that are being successful. I think USAID has logged about over 1,000 different innovations, but quite a lot of them are not being implemented. So there's a lot of scope. I think we've done a lot in terms of coming up with innovations, but now it's time to get those innovations into farmers' fields and get them onto use. in-country collaboration and stakeholder engagement absolutely essential if we were going to get those innovations to work and be effectively utilized. So the innovations, they have produced evidence of improving agricultural productivity. They've been used for food safety. I haven't mentioned about aflatoxins and all that. That's quite important, but there's aspect to food safety, nutritional status, and livelihood as well. So it protect them from shocks and stress. So I think that these innovations are going to be a key to try to achieve the goal of SDG 2, which is coming out quite fast. I think that's it for me.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ermias, for this really comprehensive view of intersection of the socio-economic, political, technology, obviously culture too, framework that we do need to subscribe to in order to advance the goal number 2. I would like to introduce now our other participants who are here to share their knowledge and their expertise. So I'm going to introduce everyone, and then we'll engage in a conversation, and I have some questions to each of you. First of all, Patrick Cortbaoui is an agriculture engineer, food security consultant, and project manager with over 15 years of track record in providing solutions to alleviate food insecurity in different regions of the world: North America, Latin America, Caribbean, Africa, Middle East, and Asia. So Patrick covers the entire world as he works through and currently he's working as a managing director at the Margaret Gilliam Institute for Global Food Security of McGill University in Canada, strengthening the institute's role and partnership between academia, private sector, governments, and NGOs, obviously the stakeholders and actors that Ermias has also discussed. Our second panelist is Leonardo Luis Guilletti, who is an associate professor in the Department of Environmental Health, Faculty of Public Health at the University of São Paulo in Brazil. His expertise is in sustainability in health, health promotion, participatory research, and the urban water energy food nexus, exactly that kind of intersection of many, many dimensions. So he does takes an interdisciplinary approach and focus on socio-environmental vulnerable groups. Our third panelist is George Leeds. He's a professor of international nutrition at Newcastle University in UK. And his expertise lies in the area of human nutrition with specific focus on fat-soluble vitamins, fatty acids, and related micronutrients. His research group is known both nationally and internationally for research on diet-gene interaction and has established the most sensitive and cost-effective method to analyze vitamin A status in humans. And last but not least, José Eduardo Villalobos is a soil and water science professional, passionate for agriculture. No doubt all participants are passionate for agriculture here. He currently works as a professor of soil science at Earth University in Costa Rica. And he has specialized in the integration of information layers at different levels for an accurate diagnosis of site-specific situation on agricultural farm. During the last few years, he also served as a coordinator and co-director of the Precision Agriculture Center at Earth University. I'm going to use this opportunity also to acknowledge, because I saw in the chat, President Arturo Condo, who is the president of Earth University, and who has been really a partner in building this consortium and engaging through University Global Coalition. And he is actually a chair of the conference committee. So Arturo, thank you so much for being here, joining us, and for all your hard work to work together across the world. So let me now start off our discussion today by asking each of you for a brief overview of your current work, and that you can share with the audience. And then I also have some questions to all participants. So Patrick, starting with you, what do we mean by global food security? And are there any common challenges that people in the different parts of the world are facing that are preventing them from actually benefiting from food security? And if yes, and I assume the answer is yes, what are the really implications for SDGs 2, and also maybe for other SDGs, right? Because all SDGs are very much connected with each other. So Patrick, the floor is yours.
Well, thanks a lot, Joanna, and I'm so happy to be here with you today. And please allow me to share some slides in order in response to your question. There you go. All right. So, what do we really mean by global food security? Before we start, we have to all agree that food is a human right, right? And it was declared back in 1948 by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that everybody is allowed or has the right to have a decent life with a healthy and well-being life also for the person and his family, including food. So to start with, food is a human right. And what do we really mean by food security, by global food security? By the definition, also from the World Food Summit back in 1996, food security exists when all people at all times have physical, social, and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food that meets their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life. So you can tell immediately that you have so different kind of 4 different or 5 keywords here that define food security, and it's not only limited to a certain time or certain geographic area. It should be when all people at all times. Before we jump to the SDGs, I want to just cover a little bit, just to mention the 4 different pillars or dimensions of food security. And so the first one is availability. That means the quantity. So the first question we usually ask, does food exist near me in terms of production, importation, and exportation? And I guess these days after this kind of pandemic, and we're still not finishing, we didn't go yet outside it. So people are start asking those kind of questions. Do we still have food that near us? The second question, or the second pillar, is accessibility. And the net question there could be then, can I get food easily? Do I have the means, the financial means? Do I have the the infrastructure, the physical access to food? We know that one of the major problems these days is not the quantity of kind of food available for the entire population, is more than accessibility and distribution of food. So, and the third pillar is, or dimension, is stability. What do we mean by this? Is that we're talking more about the will food be available tomorrow, next week, or the next month? How stable we gonna, or how we always can ensure that we have food available for us? And this is also part of the a stable, sustainable governance from the decision makers in each state and each country. And the fourth and the last pillar is, will this food contribute to my health and well-being? How far I know how to best use this kind of food in terms of water, energy, sanitation, and so on. So what are the different common global challenges? I start with the pandemic and the diseases, and then conflicts and wars. We saw how our current broken system, our current food system is broken and fragile, right? Based on conflicts and due actually to conflicts and wars. Look at the agriculture-related risk. We're talking about higher food losses. We're talking about inappropriate handling practices. We're talking about bad infrastructures, right? What about the entire population growth? We're talking about an extra 2 billion people coming to Earth by 2050. So how are we going to feed those extra 2 billion people coming, right? And without forgetting the climate extreme disasters like flooding and drought that definitely affect, and it's a global challenges that affecting food insecurity, food inequalities and corruptions as well. Poverty is the major issue. It's a global and common issues between developing and developed countries. Recent statistics also showed that you know, even Canadians, we have like around 4.5 to 5.5 Canadian food insecure people. So it's not only limited to developing countries, right? And not least, I want to just say a few words about the difficulties that smallholder farmers are struggling worldwide. And when I said worldwide, as I mentioned before, is in developing and developed countries, in terms of, you know, like people like especially smallholder farmers, they have inadequately, or they have shortages in adequate resources for them to produce. They have, you know, they were sometimes imposed by quality standards from the developed countries coming to them, and that will definitely affect their kind of yield. As I said, the reality is we have a broken food system where in 2021 we have around 2.37 billion people that experience food insecurity. Around 830 million people were affected by hunger in 2021. 1 in 9 people go to bed hungry every single night. It's not because there is not enough food, but because they don't have accessible and available food for them. 600 million people also, they will still be facing hunger by 2030, and this is the last, you know, projections from the FAO. Which is the same as it was in 2015, exactly when the 2030 agenda was launched. And add to this, 3.1 billion people could not afford a healthy diet these days, because healthy diets are really expensive compared to unhealthy diets. In 2020, we have 22% of children are under 5 years of age. They are stunted. 6.7%, and we're talking about millions of people here are children. They were wasted, and 5.7% they were overweight. You can see the different paradox here between underweight and obesity. 2 billion hectares were previously produced in land. They were degraded today, and agriculture today consumes 70% of available fresh water. 1/3 of the world's foods is lost or wasted. That definitely it's around can feed 2 billion extra people, right? And poor agricultural practices impact the climate change and price of stable foods that could reach more than double even by 2030. And to conclude on this slide, 80% of the world's hungry people are directly involved in the food production. This is very sad. And the last comment, or the last alarming statistics, is that it shows more than 50% of the government aid in developing countries, mainly, they were cut for smallholder producers. As I said, also 71%, they are of the 71% death globally due to NCDs, and 25% of greenhouse gas emissions are coming from agriculture. As you can tell, that we're SDG number 2, based on the recent reports from the SDG report 2022. Because of conflict, climate change, and COVID, we are convening to undermine the food security worldwide. And about 1 in 10 people, they're suffering from hunger, and 1 in 3 people, they don't have adequate food. And add to this, as I said, the Ukraine war, and so on. That will definitely accelerate or increase or trigger the food shortages worldwide. And last but not least, the world is unfortunately not on track to achieve SDGs by 2030. And as the United Nations SDG recent report stated, that as the world faces cascading and interlinked global crises and conflicts, the aspirations set out in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development are in jeopardy. However, they still see, I like this kind of optimistic message or take-home message for the entire group that SDGs could be a roadmap out of this crisis. If humanity is to survive, we must survive it together, and so we should leaving no one behind. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Patrick. I'm glad that you ended up on a slightly positive note, because the statistics have been really alarming and pretty depressing, given that we are already in 2022. So, and your statistic that some things were the way they were now several years ago, they're obviously contributing to not making fast enough progress. I'm going to turn now over to Leandro, and I was wondering if you could share some insights on how the sustainability and health interacts with the hunger challenges. How do we ensure actually that the vulnerable groups are included in our approaches and solutions to these challenges? So, Leandro, the floor is yours.
Hello. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you, Drew and Joanna. It's really exciting to be with you here in the University Global Coalition. I brought some insights to on the water, energy, food nexus. You must have heard about it. So we have tried to connect this idea in the discussion of sustainability and access to healthy food, but also connecting different scales, even or urban communities. So we also appreciate the ideas on the sustainable development goals, of course, but it's quite remarkable that it's not easy to have greater developments in all of these dimensions through different goals. Actually, we have to consider that some of the goals can be even antagonistic to others. Because, for example, if we are trying to provide more food for millions or billions of vulnerable people in the world, the same vulnerable people are also needing, for example, water and energy. But to produce food, we know we need too much water and energy, and to provide water, we need energy too, and so on. So the main concern on this idea of nexus is to consider to understand the centrality of the water resources scarcity and the interplay through different chains. So we have tried to find a possible analysis of this, like in the situation. This is the macro metropolis of São Paulo. It's a big urban complex urban system in São Paulo state in Brazil. So it aggregates different metropolitan regions and other urban regions in the in a big urban territory with more than 34 million inhabitants, and with 180 municipalities. So in this analysis, we tried to classify municipalities to the proportion of provision of ecosystem services and flows that are connected to the idea of the nexus. So what we found here is that this cluster identified in purple, named providers, are municipalities that are providing a great proportion of environmental services and flows for the nexus, but at the same time, they are suffering from territorial environmental injustice, since they have the worst indicators for human development indexes. So this is a matter of thinking about sustainability and access to resources in a huge territorial scale. But also, we have tried to understand how people in urban poor communities are dealing in the everyday scarcity in terms of accessing and managing and having different social practices to deal with the need and demand for water, energy, and food. So in this case, we studied the municipality of Guarulhos, which belongs to the metropolitan region of São Paulo. So we started through ethnographic study, trying to understand the knowledges of people and social practice that can be related positively or negatively to the nexus. So we called the positive relations synergies to the nexus. So, for example, how people manage the scarcity of water, how do get rainwater, collect it and keep the rainwater, for example, and so on. This is a kind of synergy to the nexus. On the other side, the contradictions, the negative aspects is how some social practices can be even worse in the perspective of sustainability and the scarcity of resources. So in this case, the neighborhoods that we have studied can be considered as a food desert, as you must know about this. So the matter of the acquisition of healthy food, fresh food mainly, is mediated by many conditionants from the territory. For example, there is a lack of options to buy fresh food in the neighborhood. For buying fresh food, people have to go out of the neighborhood, so it demands transportation and relates to energy, which relates to water too. And also the neighborhood is kind of isolated from the good benefits of being in the metropolitan region. So all of this mediates the relations and demands on water and energy to have access to fresh food. But otherwise, as they have experienced, some local production of food represents a big opportunity in terms of a synergetic option for, reducing the pressure in this chain of interdependencies. So some people at the neighborhood produce and sell fresh food. And mainly this is the most important possibility for people who live in this neighborhood to have access to healthy food. Also, we work in this neighborhood with the participatory research and implementation of a community garden, but it can be a matter for another meeting, maybe. So I will stop by here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Leandro. And we're moving on to the topic that I think by now we've established very, very much, and that is interdisciplinarity. All the speakers have pointed out to various nexuses. So, George, I'm turning over to you. And I was wondering if you could talk about how the interdisciplinary skills and approaches are really critical for addressing zero hunger and how that relates to nutrition. Are there any kind of innovative ways that we at the universities can nurture, advance this kind of work with our students, faculty, and kind of build up the pathway for the leadership for the future? And you mute it.
Thank you, Joanna. Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here tonight, and I'm kind of really grateful to be able to share some of my thoughts on this really important topic. So what I'd like to do actually is first of all show everyone, one second, if I may able to show the next slide. Here we go. Yeah. So what I think is really important when we talk about the question of interdisciplinarity is that we need to understand how complex the relationship is between the question of nutrition and hunger and the underlying conditions. And what this slide very eloquently shows in a publication that was published a few years ago in The Lancet is that nutritional problems are really interlinked with agricultural, economic, social, political, and climatic factors. And food availability in itself, as we just heard very nicely from the two previous speakers, can actually be affected in a way that we have either food scarcity or in the new ways that we've seen happening around the world, that we actually have what we call malnutrition. And in fact, the WHO has coined the malnutrition as the double burden of malnutrition, because we now have, as we've just heard, both undernutrition and overnutrition in the world. And the problem that we face in terms of trying to find solution that we've heard early on from Ermias is that we need to look at it from a holistic point of view. So we're kind of seeing that the natural system is influenced by governance, by macro, meso, and micro systems that you see on this slide here, that then influence the overall decision-making process and the overall effect that these different factors have on developing solutions to trying to reduce hunger and to trying to reduce undernutrition. And when it comes to undernutrition or hunger, what is really important also that we don't just simply focus on undernutrition in terms of food, but that we also focus undernutrition in terms of not energy, but that we also focus it on what we call the hidden hunger. That means that food needs to be nutritious, as we've just heard earlier on, not just simply giving us sufficient amount of energy, because if you have not sufficient amount of nutrients in your diet, then you have what we call the hidden hunger, which means that you develop deficiencies in specific nutrients and so on. So the question that we need to ask ourselves, can we actually work? And is there a indication in the scientific community that things are starting to work in relation to different disciplines working together? And I want to show kind of like two slides in where we start seeing that things are changing. The first example really comes from an area where we're kind of looking at food production in itself. So we're looking here at the use of land, agricultural land, and food security. And if we start looking at the publications that we have in the public domain, kind of like from the late 90s up to today, we see a clear increase in publications, and therefore also the interest in trying to address the problems in this area. And they are ranging from, as you can see here, urban and peri-urban agricultural movement to sustainability, to dynamics of land systems, to efficiency of agricultural systems, climate change, as well as motivation of small-scale farmers. So it's kind of like looking at the whole spectrum of different aspects that are influencing agriculture. And then if we start looking at where these studies have been coming from, we see actually that they are globally represented, looking from dynamics over to climate change and the effects of climate change to urban and peri-urban agricultural movement and land sustainability. What is currently not clear in terms of looking at all these different factors is that how much do we actually investigate to integrate all these different factors by just not looking at one factor on its own, but how do we actually start looking at the integration of these different factors to get a better understanding of the interrelationship between food production and nutrition and the food system in general. So this is something that is developing, but clearly there is still a lack of clear interdisciplinarity that we need to focus on going forward into the future. The second example that I'd like to show is development, again, that has really taken on traction in the scientific community, and that is biofortification, i.e. Fortification of foods by different methods. Now, you have breeding approaches that are trying to enhance the nutritional quality of foods. And can I put here some key publications that came out as reviews where people have looked at how can we actually trying to implement better nutritious foods and how can we actually breed them and create them. This goes from genome-wide editing of specific plants, in this case here wheat, for example, but then also the question around how do we actually make this available and how do we govern the regulatory frameworks to make sure that these foods become available. And some of us may remember the hot debate that we had about golden rice, like about nearly 20 years ago, and how that actually has moved on now in terms of biofortification, not just looking at GMO-related techniques, but also traditional techniques that are used in biofortification of foods nowadays that have moved the field really a lot forward. The other important question that we then need to ask is, how are all these different aspects affecting the effectiveness of these methods in relation to addressing the key questions, which is reducing of hunger, but also reducing of malnutrition. And the critical question that we then need to ask ourselves is, how well are we prepared for the next big problem that we are facing, which is climate change, i.e., are these kind of like new techniques that we've been developing over the last 10, 15, 20 years really adaptable to the new challenges that we are facing going forward, which is, for example, questions of water scarcity that we've just heard early on, the question also, do we actually need to learn from different backgrounds that we have in terms of understanding of how does a crop grow in an arid area, how does it grow in a more climatic area, and how is that all changing with time, and can we actually learn from each other as to how we adapt our practices to make sure that these plants are growing correctly. And then finally, what is really important also, particularly with climate change, we will see due to the increase in temperature also that certain foods are just not stable over a long period of time. And therefore, maybe we need to rethink whether some nutrients need to be increased in their concentration, or whether there needs to be a shift from one nutrient to another to make sure that nutrient or that nutritious food really are nutritious going forward, and that they're not negatively affected by climate change. So in a summary, there is clearly a good traction in the scientific community that new upcoming areas are looked into. There is interaction clearly between different disciplines, because as you can imagine, biofortification as an example is a clear indication that you have people like breeders, agricultural faculties, nutritional faculties, and in some cases even social faculties that are all working together trying to understand how can we implement these new techniques. But there is a lot more work to be done, because we are facing new challenges trying to address UN SDG 2 that needs much more interdisciplinary working in the future. That's all. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, George. And I want to turn over now to Jose and give him the floor by really asking you the question about the agricultural sustainability important, and how does it intersect really with other local and global challenges. We already talked about global warming, resource depletion. We've talked about socioeconomic sustainability and so on. So I was wondering if you can explore that theme, and we'll sort of close our panelist presentations, and we'll have time for a few more interactions and also addressing and engaging with the audience if there are questions. So to the audience, if there are any questions, please put them in the chat so we can engage with you also. So Jose, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Joanna. First of all, I would like to thank everybody attending today. It's an honor to me be part of this group of scientists and share the floor with them. And of course, a big thank to everybody that put this together. I know it's a lot of work. Well, since I love agriculture, I would like to make us all remember that the first signs of agriculture date back to the Neolithic. That's a long time ago. So we can be sure that agriculture is an activity that is that plays a central role in our society, not just in the model, but also in the social order. In fact, we can almost say it's in our DNA already. However, well, there is no secret. It's hard to produce food. It's not an easy task. It has a high risk due to the countless variables that affect the business. We can say plagues, we can say water, we can say, everything, even the market itself. It's so complex to produce food. And on the top of that, farmers are being asked to meet a rising demand and be better at producing nutritious food. So it's not easy. It's a complex scenario that we have on the farming side of the story. As an anecdote, while I was at grad school, I had a lab partner. He's my colleague. His family owned an orange grove in Florida, and on his truck, on the bumper sticker, it says, "Proud farmer, accidental environmentalist." And it was funny to me at that time, but now that I think a little bit deeper on it, well, there is some truth in that. Maybe in some cases, it's purely because of a financial perspective, where farmers see as an incentive to preserve and improve soil, because that's what sustains and increases their livelihood, right? So we have to be sure that farmers, they don't want to harm the environment. If they do so, there must be something around that is making them take advantage of non-renewable resources. And that's what we have to look on, right? In our case at Earth University, specifically, me and my team, on the last and plus years, we've worked with more than 100 farmers, both in Costa Rica and Guatemala, giving them a very close follow-up, mostly on a technical support point of view, which is precision agriculture, focusing on the most efficient methods of their resources, specifically on soil. So soil erosion, nutrition in terms of fertilizers, physics of soil. So all that's what we were working with them on, right? It's important to underline that precision agriculture for us, it's a concept, it's not the tools that are meant to be used to get the data. So we all talk about innovation, and we have to be innovative, and it's a trendy word, but innovation, it's very related, and it depends a lot on who you talk to. We've been to very remote areas where just seeing the color of the soil, which is information, very basic information, was an innovation in order to change their management. Also, we do some high-tech and things like, hyperspectral signatures and stuff. But what we try to do is accommodate the technologies to the environment we're working on. And on these 6+ years working with farmers, I've realized that there is challenges that we have to go through in order to make them be more sustainable. And I'm going to mention only two, because there is several of them. And the first one, which all of my previous colleagues have mentioned, is that the support has to be holistic. In my case, at the beginning, I was so technical about it, like, all right, you have to put this rate, as Dr. Ermias said before, right place, right dose. I was like that, you have to be so technical. You have to put that much. But at the end, that's just a little piece of the puzzle. What we've realized is that it has to be holistic, and it just doesn't have to lay under technical issues. In the last projects, we've worked also including precision ag, but access to market. And that make a huge change on the implementation of new techniques, because they were seeing value on applying right time, right rate. And so that's one thing that we have to keep in mind. And the other thing, it's the average age of farmers in the places we work on. They are somewhere around, in average, 60-year-old, which I know it's not very old age though. But what captures my attention is that there is not many young people getting to the business, and we all can assume why. It's hard. So we have to work very hard making this an attractive industry for the young people. And the question is right there. We have tried it with technology, we have tried it with science, and showing them that it's not just about getting rubber boots on and a machete and work in the field, but it's also about science. Producing in the farm, I bet it has a lot more science going on than a whole lab. So it's important to make young people excited about it. That's another thing that we have to work on. And finally, I would like to mention a couple aspects that I personally think are important to underline. Agriculture itself, from where we started to where we end, it's a value chain, and there is several steps on that value chain where the farmer, it's involved on few of them. So I think we must assume in this sustainability issue, we have to assume and share the responsibility, not only to generate models, but also to become more efficient and more empathic. Why not that sticker be retailers proud environmentalists, right? So we have to share that responsibility. I know it's hard to solve these sustainability problems, and it's not easy, since the world, we all are happy because it's easy to get information and we get it really fast, but the world's still big, and there is a lot of things that we don't know about the people living next to us. So it's important to realize that what we think might not be the solutions for other places, and there is where we have to pay a lot of attention and be humble on how we can solve these sustainability problems. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jose. I want to turn over. We have a question in the chat from Laurie, and I was wondering if I can ask you, the panelists, to share your thoughts. Laurie is asking, with everything going on, the war in Ukraine, over 100 food manufacturers have burned down in the past 3 months in the US and over the globe. How are we preparing for a possible global famine? Anybody wants to tackle this one? All right, George.
Yeah, I can give a start at least. It's a very, very complex issue, and I've seen some of the figures, particularly coming from Ukraine, in terms of how important Ukraine is when it comes to the world supply of wheat, and how dependent our system has been on this. So I think what we need to do is, when we need to try to answer this question, is that we need to think medium term and long term. I'm much more concerned about the long term issue than about the medium or short term issue. In the short term issue, yes, we will have a problem, but I think there are potential solutions around that issue. And it all depends really where in the world we live, in terms of trying to buffer the current problem that we are experiencing. There are different examples from human history that we can potentially learn from. And where I'm from, in the United Kingdom, for example, we just need to look 70, 80 years back when the Second World War started. The United Kingdom was completely cut off of supplies, was completely dependent on food coming into the country, and they started becoming much more independent, locally producing. And that means that, even public gardens were produced into food producing areas. So there are ways of getting around the particular issues that doesn't apply for every single area. So you still have areas that right now, for example, in Somalia, we have a massive problem in terms of food insecurity that you cannot overcome because of droughts. So it doesn't apply all the time, but there are ways of trying to address some of the issues. What I'm much more concerned about is the long-term issue. And I think what we need to start doing is to understand what are the interlinkages, what kind of solutions do we need going forward? And we need to start implementing certain understandings and more interlinked and interdisciplinary research to better find solutions going forward. Because if we don't understand what's happening and how climate change is going to address the whole issue of food insecurity, then we will be running ourselves into a real problem. Also, what I think the current crisis shows us very well is that the current system is just simply not working, and that we need to address it. As a nutritionist, one of the problems that I can see is that virtually till now, we've looked at food insecurity by making sure that everyone has enough energy. We've looked at calories, but we haven't looked at nutritious diets. And if we carefully look around the world, we actually see that even the poorest of the poorest are starting to have more binging on food, i.e. they kind of go into snacking and all these kind of foods that are high in energy, but very, very poor in terms of nutrition. And this is something that we need to address, whether that's kind of due to kind of new innovations or whether that's due to kind of better understanding your neighbor, as Jose nicely indicated, in terms of understanding what are the needs, but also educating the next generation and people around the world as to, you know, what we need to do to make sure that food is available, but at the same time also nutritious.
Great, thank you, George. Any other panelists? Ermias, are you ready to speak? Are you thinking?
Well, I think George has really addressed the situation where, you know, it's a case of getting different solutions. There's not just one global solution for this problem. I think it's the solutions have to come up in different ways. And, you know, one of the biggest issue, for example, is fertilizer production, which Ukraine was quite a big part of. And so you see now there's some solutions where people are trying to do local production of fertilizers, whether it's going to be changing the waste products and using more manure instead of relying on organic fertilizers. You know, in places like Vietnam, for example, there's a lot of inorganic fertilizer use because they want to get 2 or 3 crops a year. And so now, but still there's a lot of animals there, a lot of manure, a lot of pigs. And so instead of relying on inorganic fertilizers, moving to a more organic fertilizer, making the use of that manure as well. So yeah, I think it's, it just depends where you are. And yeah, the situation is quite unique, but I think there are different solutions that are sort of applicable in different parts of the world.
I think Patrick, I saw your, thank you, Ermias. I saw Patrick, your hand.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Joanna. I just need to echo what George and Ermias said, and there is no magic stick, right? So it's kind of a global crisis and global problem, and but I want to just echo on what they said about as we individuals, we can start, or, you know, at least university level, we can definitely, and we already started, you know, promoting like production, like local production of our food. We're training, we do some capacity building for local production from our local kind of, you know, farmers. So if I want to put it in a very diplomatic wording, is that moving from a colonial food system to a decolonized food system, right? And this is, for me, it could be the solution for, you know, to, as a, for, you know, we can start now and the net food can come in several years from now, but we should start to give the voices of the most marginalized, in like native or indigenous people. They know about, you know, I've been traveling to those developing countries for many years, and the first question I always ask, how do you guys want us to help you? They always said, well, Patrick, don't tell us how to grow our own food. We know exactly how to grow food. If you want to help us stop corruption, build us infrastructure, put us in direct contact with the nearest markets. So, you know, this is something for me that we should learn. If there is any positive, if there is any positive side of this pandemic, unfortunately it's a pandemic, but if there is any a positive side of it, is that we start to think differently a little bit, and we start to think locally than just globally. Thank you.
As a geographer, I could not agree more. Local really makes a difference because of the different conditions, and the result of that, the solutions have to be certainly connected. Leandro or Jose, is there anything you want to add?
Okay,
Well,
thank you. Oh, please.
Go ahead,
Jose?
please, Leandro, you
Okay,
first.
Thank you. You know, I don't work with this ideas of knowledge of food production. I have been connected with these ideas of multidimensionality of sustainability and respective challenges, even connecting with public health. But I have think that there is no single or simple solution for the problems that we are dealing with. For example, when we talk about climate change, there is a common global language about climate change, but climate change must be seen differently at any different single poor community in the world. So I think there is a challenge in terms of connecting the local aspects and making a kind of legitimacy in terms of how people are dealing with the constraints of climate change in their daily lives, with the possibilities of knowledge production and implementation of public policies. So in this case, I think that we have to we have to promote this power of diversity and also possibility of merging or making hybrid possibilities to application of alternatives, even for food production, consumption, or even in terms of connecting to the global scarcities that relates to unsustainability.
Jose, you wanted to also?
Yes, ma'am. Well, very short. I cannot agree more with everybody, especially on what the pandemic has brought us, where we see that us as human, we need some sort of really close feeling of crisis in order to make changes in our habits. And I think not everybody is so aware of how in what bad shape we are. It's, I don't know if it's the right translation, but there is a tale in Spanish, which is the 3 pigs and there is a wolf that is coming, and everybody says the wolf is coming, the wolf is coming. Nobody believed them, and when the wolf came, it ate 2 of them, only didn't eat the one that believed that wolf is coming. And well, I think it's the same story, where we as scientists are telling everybody, hey, come on, hey, we have to be better at what we do. And sometimes people are so focused on other stuff that they don't really pay attention to what really matters. And one of the matters that are so important for humanity, it's what we eat and how we eat and what are we eating. So I think, you know, it's about making people conscious. That's the only way to overcome and bring solutions into practice. Because I bet, you know, we are as a human society, we've been here for a long time, that if we all get together, we know how to get out of it fast. The problem is that it doesn't depend on the actual solution, but the implementation of the solution. So that's what I have to add.
So we have few minutes left, and I wanted just to pose one last question to all of you, because you all represent universities, and we do play a role and have to play a role. And so I was wondering if you can share very quickly your last thoughts. How can universities work in a more equitable partnership with local communities to advance all that nexus that we've talked about, the food, nutrition, urban water, energy, and so forth? How do you see your role? We all involved in the research, we all do all kind of work, but that kind of local community partnerships in an equitable way, what Patrick was talking also about, decolonizing the food. Any final thoughts that you might want to share?
Oh, if you want, I can go first.
Okay.
It's really
Go.
short. I truly believe that we should apply reality-based learning and reality-based teaching instead of, you know, concepts that might be true but might be old. So that's what us as universities should bring into our campuses, some reality.
Great, thank you. Other words of wisdom? Patrick?
Yes, if I want to just say a few words about it very quick, I see that operational research that has some end users, right? People, they need to, like, the beneficiaries for us are the major stakeholders, And if we cannot detach ourselves from the reality of things. So if university has a major role to play and to promote and to advocate for, as I said, applied research that has some end users, because those are our beneficiaries, and this is how we can find solutions for them. Thank you.
Yeah, I think just going on that one also, the biggest advantage we have as a university is that training. So capacity building, is something that we have to continue to do, but capacity building in a way that is effective on the ground, and we have to have partners that work with us and basically learn. I think it's not one-way street. I think it has to be a two-way street where you learn from the community and then help in capacity development as well.
Thank you. Any other thoughts, George?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what everyone is saying, but I also think what's really important in terms of making these equitable partnerships is that we also need to think about the north-south and east-west partnerships, and that actually each partner can bring something else into the equation. So this is kind of like relation to working as universities globally, not just kind of like locally. So it's really important to have the aspect of local aspects. So for example, in my own city, we have life expectancy that differs 10 years depending on where you live in the city. So we have inequality with kind of that are local, but we also have inequality that is national and that is global. And I think we need to be able to address that. And the best way of doing that is by really working globally and working together. So this consortium that we now have is a perfect platform to actually start creating discussions and creating these interactions that help us to understand the problems better, but also to trying to address them.
Right, thank you, George. I also wanted to acknowledge that we have a question for the panelists, but we're running out of time. Although I think Patrick is trying to answer, but I'll read you the question, and then if you have any thoughts or the person Alfredo wants to follow up. So the question is: I do not see the subject of rising prices of food in the conversation, and this is the key factor affecting food availability. Cereal prices have increased up to 60% after the COVID pandemic. We talk about imperfect food markets, typical. Alfredo is from Chile, where there are two main producers of chicken meat agreed illegally to raise prices for many years without being discovered and punished until recently. So do we need more active government policies to search and punish such illegal market agreements? And presumably we are in agreement that yes, we do, but obviously it's a challenge. And with the changing geopolitics these days so often, I think that's in itself is a challenge as the governments are changing. And the result of that, new governments, new politicians bring new solutions and throw away the product of their work of the predecessors, right? So there is also the tension between new waves. At this point, I will thank all the panelists. We are wrapping up. Drew is putting in the chat the links for us for the session and the future thinking engage. And just to remind everybody that the recording will be available probably within the week. And then there was a question earlier if anybody is willing to share the slides. If the panelists are in agreement, then we actually have the slides, so we'll be able to share with others. So on that note, thank you so much to the panelists and to the audience who join us. We appreciate your comments, thinking, and hope we can move to the action, local and global. Thank you so much to everyone, and
Thank you.
have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.